25 years ago, on a harsh winter night in Wisconsin, a young woman named Rachel Miller vanished on her way home after meeting friends, leaving behind no trace except her car abandoned in the white snow. Police suspected she had been abducted or murdered, but with no body, no witnesses, no clear evidence, the investigation ultimately stalled, leaving her family in despair. However, for nearly 2 decades afterward, a new team of investigators never gave up, clinging to the belief that something had been overlooked in those dusty old files. Then one day, while re-examining what seemed like meaningless evidence, they uncovered a tiny detail that everyone had forgotten, a detail powerful enough to change the entire case and shock the state of Wisconsin. Before diving deep into this dramatic story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love cold cases solved after many years, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. February 2000, the town of Janesville, Wisconsin, was still immersed in a long and cold winter. Snow covered the narrow roads leading to the industrial area, the leafless trees along the streets, standing silent under the faint orange streetlights. Rachel Miller, 30 years old, worked as an administrative employee for a small insurance company in the town center, living with her husband in a one-story house in a quiet suburb. She was careful, kept regular habits, and almost never came home late. That evening, Rachel went with her close group of friends to their usual bowling alley to relax after a week of work. Nothing was unusual about the gathering. A few games, laughter, ordinary conversations about work and family. When the session ended, she left the group earlier than the others, saying she wanted to head home because she had to work the next day. Outside, snow began to fall lightly, small flakes drifting down onto the dark, damp road. Rachel drove her red Pontiac out of the parking lot, heading toward the familiar road running along the Marshall industrial area to get home. It was the route she took every day, taking just 15 minutes if there was no snow. Her friends later said they saw her car lights fade into the white fog, then disappear completely at the turn. None of them imagined that was the last time they would see Rachel alive. The night passed without anyone noticing anything unusual, but by morning, as faint sunlight filtered through the curtains, the Miller couple's house remained silent. The car was not in the driveway, the bedroom empty, the landline with no messages. Tom Miller searched the whole house, checking the kitchen, living room, then went outside to ask neighbors if anyone had seen his wife come home the night before. No one had. He called a few of her friends, all of whom said Rachel had left the bowling alley early. As the clock ticked past mid-morning with still no news, worry turned to fear. Tom drove along the route his wife usually took, stopping at a few familiar spots, looking around the empty road sections, then returned home. Finally, he picked up the phone and reported to the police that his wife was missing. That call was logged on that freezing morning when the sun had not yet melted the thin frost covering the rooftops on the edge of Janesville. A patrol car was dispatched to the Miller family's address, and Sergeant Carl Henson was the first to step through the door. The house was so quiet you could hear the scratch of his pen on the report form. Henson quickly scanned the living room, then walked down the hallway. No signs of forced entry on the doors, furniture still in place, everything neat as usual. In the bedroom, the blanket was folded smoothly, Rachel's wristwatch and ring still on the dresser. Her thick coat was hanging in the closet. Her work shoes placed neatly by the door, only her purse and cell phone were missing, along with her. Henson conducted a preliminary interview with Tom Miller and noted no signs of voluntary departure, no personal items taken. Upon returning to the Rock County headquarters, he reported the case to investigator Ron Peters, who handled adult missing persons in the area. That same day, a new file was opened and coded MP-01 RJM, short for Rachel's name. Peters arrived at the Miller home that afternoon, examining the scene once more. He found no signs of an argument or break-in. Everything suggested a woman who had left the house in the morning, not vanished in the middle of the night. In the initial interview, Tom Miller recounted the previous night in detail. The couple had gone with friends to the Lucky Strike Lanes bowling alley, Rachel left early to head home, while he stayed a bit longer. When he got home, he assumed she was asleep, so he didn't check until the next morning. His statement matched the information from the friends who were there, who confirmed Rachel left the parking lot alone, driving her red Pontiac toward the Marshall Industrial area. Peters used a local map to pinpoint the route she usually took, about a 6-mile stretch, passing an old warehouse area, abandoned rail tracks, and a small gas station on the outskirts. He marked several points where she might have stopped: intersections, old warehouse lots, empty truck parking areas. These were locations with almost no surveillance cameras at the time. Alongside determining the route, police also reviewed personal factors. Rachel's work record was stable: no debts, no conflicts with colleagues or family. Bank accounts and credit cards showed no new transactions. Her cell phone had stopped working since the previous evening. These facts ruled out voluntary departure, forcing the investigation to consider that she had encountered something unusual on the way home. The next morning, as the snow temporarily stopped and the sky turned pale gray, an official search warrant was issued. Rock County Police coordinated with local rescue forces, mobilizing 2 patrol units, 2 K-9 teams, and nearly 20 local volunteers. They focused on the parking lot of an old warehouse on the edge of the Marshall Industrial area, the midpoint on the route Rachel might have taken. It was a wide area with many turns leading to abandoned factories, container yards, and inactive rail lines. Everyone split into small groups, given maps and walkie-talkies, moving in strips from the southern residential area to the small river on the outskirts. The temperature was just above freezing, strong winds whipping snow into a blur, making the search more difficult. The most experienced were assigned to scan low-traffic areas, old parking lots, loading bridges and trails running parallel to the industrial route. Meanwhile, the K-9 team started tracking scents from the industrial area gate northward. After more than 2 hours, results were almost nothing. Snow that had fallen all night had erased any possible traces: no tire tracks, no footprints, no drag marks. Police checked snowdrifts along the roadside for signs of skidding or falling into a ditch, but found no collision evidence. A young officer spotted an unusual snow depression next to an old lumber warehouse, but digging down revealed only hard ice and debris. At the gas station near the tracks, staff said they didn't recall seeing a red Pontiac stop that night, nor heard any unusual noises. The entire area was swept sequentially until late afternoon, but no personal items of Rachel's were found. Meanwhile, at headquarters, investigator Ron Peters continued reviewing additional information. He contacted State Highway Patrol to verify all accidents within a 10-mile radius, but all were negative. The NCIC system database showed no use of Rachel's ID or license plate anywhere else. The only sign she had passed through the area was statements from a few residents near the industrial zone, who said they saw car lights through their windows around midnight, but couldn't identify the vehicle type or direction. That evening, as the first search team returned, Peters held a brief meeting in a temporary room set up in the industrial area. Tired faces, everyone's hands chapped from the cold. He reviewed the list of checked areas and decided to expand the scope eastward, where a sparse forest strip ran along Highway 14. The next morning, the search continued. Volunteers from neighboring areas brought snowmobiles and clearing tools. Police set up parallel search lines, marked with red stakes in the snow to avoid overlapping areas. Walkie-talkie chatter crackled intermittently in the wind, reporting small finds: a bottle cap, a plastic piece, a few skid marks from old trucks. Nothing related to the victim. Deeper into the forest, one search group found a few small fabric scraps caught on a rusty fence, but after comparison, they were identified as old construction tarps, not clothing. The sun rose weakly, then set quickly behind thick clouds. Dropping temperatures forced teams to return earlier than planned. The day's summary report noted, no physical traces or accident signs found, no direct witnesses. Peters sat alone in the small coordination room. On the table, was a Janesville map covered in red marks for each scanned area. He realized nearly the entire route home had been checked with no results. Outside, darkness fell, wind swirling small snowflakes around the empty lot. The last patrol officers packed up equipment, K-9s were loaded into vehicles, and volunteers quietly went home. After 2 days of searching, not a single sign that Rachel had left that road. The missing person case, from a vague suspicion, had become an unsolved void, and police still had no next direction. On the third morning since Rachel vanished, a call came to the Rock County Police Center. The caller was a delivery worker for a local food company, reporting a red car parked behind the Quick Trip gas station on the north edge. XHTML of Janesville. The car looked abandoned overnight, with a thin layer of snow on the windshield and roof, no signs of movement. When asked for the license plate, he read numbers matching the missing person file. The call prompted Ron Peters to leave his office immediately. He and 2 other officers arrived at the scene within 10 minutes. The small gas station sat beside a side road leading to the highway, surrounded by warehouses and empty truck lots. Rachel's car was in the corner of the vacant lot behind the station, where streetlights didn't reach, only the gray sky's faint reflection on the snow. He approached, observing every detail. The car parked neatly. No collision signs, tires slightly sunk in snow, indicating it had been there at least one night. Doors locked, windows intact, no drag marks around the area. Under the chassis were a few old dried oil streaks, unrelated to the scene. Peters noted in his book, "Vehicle parked intentionally. No signs of force." After taking overall photos, he set up a temporary barrier with caution tape, staking a 5-meter radius. While checking the surroundings, police found a faint footprint leading to the small road, then vanishing in fresh snow. By the curb, an extinguished cigarette butt was collected, but its drop time couldn't be determined. Peters observed all this with a chilling feeling. He had handled many missing persons cases, but never seen one so tidy it was suspicious. No mess, no struggle signs, no evidence the driver was in danger there. The car seemed abandoned deliberately, near a gas station, lit all night with occasional traffic. Peters ordered the entire vehicle sealed and transported to the State Forensic Center for technical analysis. The transfer was done carefully. Wheels on a lift platform, all surfaces wrapped in nylon to preserve traces. As the convoy left the scene, nearby residents began gathering at the road's edge, whispering. An elderly woman told a local reporter the station was usually quiet. Rarely had strange cars parked long. News of the red Pontiac's discovery spread quickly through town, making many believe the case was about to be solved. But for Peters, this was just the starting point. He returned to headquarters that afternoon, requesting the technical department extract gas station records, sales logs, shift lists, security cameras if any. The manager said the rear lot camera had been broken since the previous year, only 2 recording the store area, and tapes auto-overwritten after 24 hours. Chances of getting images of Rachel there were virtually zero. The scene report was completed by day's end, 13 pages long, including vehicle position diagram, evidence catalog, and detailed description. The temporary conclusion stated, "Vehicle owned by victim Rachel Miller, no mechanical damage or accident signs. Interior intact. Likely intentional stop, then departure under undetermined circumstances." The case was officially shifted to criminal investigation. Peters wrote his final work log entry. It all starts with a car stopped in winter, silent, perfect, and leaving no explanation. At the Wisconsin State Forensic Center in Madison, Rachel's red Pontiac was brought into the testing area the very next morning. Ron Peters, along with 2 forensic technicians, was present in the observation room behind the thick glass. The process began with taking overall photographs of the vehicle from multiple angles, documenting the position of every scratch, the remaining snow accumulation, and the mud on the tires. Every action was performed slowly and in strict compliance, as this was the only piece of evidence that could reveal what had happened on the night Rachel disappeared. Outside, the air was still bitterly cold. Inside the room, the smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with a faint metallic tang in the air. The specialists removed the seals, opened the car doors, and began collecting samples. They used ultraviolet lights to check for traces of foreign substances, but found no blood streaks or bodily fluids. The steering wheel, gear shift, and dashboard were covered in a fine layer of dust, indicating the car had been inactive for at least 2 days. These areas were scanned for fingerprints, with results only identifying prints from Rachel and her husband, and no other samples clear enough for comparison. Small evidence bags were successively labeled fabric fibers, hair, dust, and fiber fragments taken from a tier in the back seat. Evidence 004A. That tier was small, less than 3 centimeters long, located on the inner edge of the seat cushion, in a spot rarely subjected to impact. When cutting out the fabric sample for examination, the technician discovered beneath the padding layer a different thin strand, slightly darker in color than the car's interior. They clipped it into a separate bag, subcoded 004A1. Every speck of dust in the seat crevices was also vacuumed and sealed in glass tubes for chemical testing. In the analysis room, the initial physical report showed no signs of struggle or coercion. No new scratches, no unusual stains, no hidden blood under UV light. Rachel's purse was opened, everything still in its place. Wallet, bank cards, documents, nothing missing. The phone was checked. The battery was completely drained, with no new messages or calls. Peters read each line of notes, clearly feeling a growing unease in his thoughts. The car was too clean, too perfect. That left only 2 possibilities. Either Rachel had stopped and left in an orderly manner, or someone had deliberately made the scene appear that way. He leaned toward the second hypothesis. The collected samples were transferred to the microanalysis department. Under the microscope, evidence 004A1 revealed 2 types of fibers, gray polyester from the seat cushion, and a thinner synthetic fiber in dark blue. This sample was described in the file as unknown synthetic fiber, possible clothing or upholstery. Simple chemical testing confirmed the second fiber contained industrial nylon components, commonly found in work clothing or safety belts. However, tracing the specific origin or extracting any adhering DNA required technology that the lab did not have at the time. The technicians stored the sample in a specialized refrigerator, sealed with security tape, and noted for next-generation DNA technology. The seat cushion was scanned for sweat traces or human skin cells, but the sample amount was too small for analysis using standard DNA amplification methods in 2000. The technical report concluded that the material contained unidentified biological traces not sufficient for testing. Another part of the examination focused on the vehicle's exterior. The tires showed no unusual skid marks. The mud caked underneath matched the clay-heavy soil, typical of the Marshall industrial area. This confirmed the car had only traveled within the town limits before stopping at the gas station. The only footprint found near the car was faintly imprinted in the snow, resembling a large men's shoe size, but the sole pattern was unclear. The print was photographed, but the time it was made could not be determined. In the 12-page summary report, the lead specialist wrote, "No signs of struggle or injury detected, no blood or unusual hair fibers beyond owner samples. Foreign fiber and dust samples have limited investigative value. No technical faults or mechanical failures detected." At the end, a line underlined in red ink, "Likelihood of victim leaving vehicle voluntarily low. Scene indicates stop with external factors, possibly forced stop or compelled exit." When the report was handed back to Peters, he read that concluding sentence over and over, feeling like he was still standing in front of a blank wall. The car, instead of providing answers, only raised more questions. Everything inside was too normal to the point of making him distrust it as a natural scene. There was no evidence of crime, but also no signs of everyday life. In the quiet winter of Wisconsin, the red Pontiac became the sole focal point of the case. A silent object containing something invisible to the naked eye. The vehicle examination report was delivered to Ron Peters 3 days after completion, marking the start of the case's first active investigation phase. The results of no signs of struggle, no blood, no physical damage, made every approach difficult. However, the details about the parking location and the unusually clean scene convinced Peters that Rachel had not left on her own. He gathered the investigation team, along with officers handling the Marshall area, to reanalyze all data. 3 main hypotheses were proposed and clearly recorded in the meeting minutes. 1. Rachel was blocked by a stranger or group on the deserted road. 2. She was attacked by an acquaintance with personal conflicts. And 3. She was the victim of a random abduction. Each direction required verification, and the team's task was to gradually eliminate possibilities. The first hypothesis, being blocked on the road, was considered the most plausible. The route Rachel took through the Marshall industrial area had few lights, many hidden curves, ideal for another vehicle to force a stop without notice. Peters ordered a review of recent criminal records in the area, especially attacks or robberies on remote roads, but found no similar cases. He also had vehicles entering and exiting the industrial zone that night, checked via security reports and company logbooks nearby. There were only a few night shift trucks and some personal vehicles of overtime employees. No reports of altercations or traffic incidents. With no clear evidence for the blocking scenario, Peters shifted to the second hypothesis. The acquaintance investigation was conducted systematically. First, the closest person, Tom Miller, the victim's husband. He was invited to headquarters for detailed statements. The interview lasted nearly 3 hours, with his lawyer present. Tom recounted the entire evening of the disappearance as before, insisting he had no conflicts or arguments with his wife. Police checked his landline and mobile phone history from 8 p.m. to midnight, showing 3 outgoing calls, 1 to a friend, 2 to colleagues, and no unusual signs. Tom's work records at the machine shop were verified. He was present for his morning shift the next day, with no signs of evasion. Though Peters did not completely rule out the husband's involvement, there was no evidence linking him to the disappearance. Rachel's close friends and colleagues were also interviewed one by one. They described her as reserved, friendly, with no work conflicts, no debts, and no personal troubles. One colleague recalled that the previous week she had mentioned planning a spring break with her husband in Door County, further supporting the view that she had no intention of leaving. Friends at the bowling alley confirmed no one noticed anything unusual in her behavior that evening. They shared that Rachel drank very little alcohol and appeared completely sober when leaving the place. The third hypothesis, random abduction, was raised when the first 2 yielded no results. Peters had the registered sex offender list checked within a 50-mile radius of Janesville. 12 were under supervision. 4 were elsewhere at the time of the incident, and the remaining 8 were confirmed by local police not to have left their residential areas. None had direct links to the victim. Still, Peters requested the analysis unit to create behavioral comparison profiles to see if there were similarities between Rachel's disappearance and recorded attacks on women in Wisconsin over the previous decade. Results from the state criminology unit showed the case had unique features: no robbery, no vandalism, no signs of conflict. This reduced the likelihood of a random attack, though it could not be entirely ruled out. While the team focused on hypotheses, the police technical department checked additional data related to Rachel's activities in the 24 hours before disappearance. Bank reports confirmed no transactions after February 19. Credit cards unused, savings and checking accounts with no withdrawals. Her mobile phone was last located near the Marshall industrial area on the evening of disappearance, with the signal then completely lost. No network logins, no sent or received messages. Credit and social security systems showed no new logins after that date. All signs indicated Rachel had vanished entirely from normal administrative channels, which, based on Peters' experience, only occurred with external intervention. By the end of the week, he prepared an interim report for the Rock County Sheriff's Office. In it, he concluded, no evidence victim left home or residence voluntarily. No financial, psychological, or social factors explain departure behavior. Vehicle discovery scene inconsistent with accident or intentional hiding. Criminal act probability predominant. The case was reclassified as missing person, suspicious circumstances. From that point, the case officially shifted from a standard missing person search to a criminal investigation. A team of 3 additional investigators was assigned, focusing on reconstructing Rachel's route on her final night. They checked every potential stop from the bowling alley to the Marshall intersection, but still no operational cameras or new witnesses. Peters noted in his work log that in every missing person case, the first 3 days are critical. As time passes without clues, the chances of finding the person alive drop significantly. In Rachel's case, that period had passed without any signs. Police ended the first work week with a series of unproven hypotheses and a nearly perfect unreal scene. In the summary minutes, Peters wrote briefly, disappearance under suspicious circumstances, likely forced stop and unlawful detention. After the case was classified as disappearance under suspicious circumstances, Ron Peters decided to expand the evidence search around the area where the Pontiac was found. Though the scene had been thoroughly processed in the initial days, he believed overlooked traces might exist beyond the cordoned radius. A team of 6 officers, 2 forensic specialists, and a pair of cadaver dogs was deployed to the area behind the gas station, where the terrain gradually turned into an abandoned railway strip running parallel to the old industrial route. This area was often snow-covered, rarely visited, with wild bushes mixed with dry grass and debris from nearby warehouses. On the morning of February 28, the team began a systematic fan pattern search, starting from the vehicle's position and expanding 100 meters in each direction. The old tracks were mostly buried in snow, with only rusted iron rails exposed in sections. A young officer, while bending to pick up a piece of metal, suddenly spotted a small silver object mixed in the thin snow layer. It was a key ring with 3 keys, one engraved with the logo of a housing manufacturer in Janesville suburbs, where Rachel and her husband had bought their home. Cross-checking the serial number confirmed it was Rachel Miller's house keys. The evidence was coded 005B, photographed in place, then sealed in a moisture-proof bag. The distance from the discovery point to the parking spot was over 200 meters northwest, beside the old tracks, a place almost no one had reason to visit. While officers marked the area, the second cadaver dog stopped at a raised mound of earth, barking continuously. Approaching, Peters saw amid the dry grass a light brown women's leather shoe exposed, the toe intact but the body caked with dried mud mixed with melted snow. Checking the brand showed it matched the shoes Rachel often wore. Images of the pair had appeared in a photo she took with friends the week before disappearance. The shoe lay askew, less than 3 meters from the tracks, with no signs of dragging or struggle. The evidence was coded 005C, photographed GPS coordinates recorded, and placed in a separate sealed bag. The matching shoe was not found despite expanding the search radius by another 300 meters. The rest of the search focused on collecting soil samples and traces around the railway area. Forensic specialists used steel spoons to take surface soil and 10 centimeters deep layers at 3 points, near where the keys were found, near the shoe's location, and in the ground between those 2 points. Each sample was placed in glass jars with tight lids, labeled 006A1, a 2, a 3, and stored at low temperature. In the slanting afternoon light, Peters noticed a faint tire track extending along the edge of the old snow, running parallel to the path leading to the main road. The track was quite shallow, possibly from a small vehicle or light truck passing when the ground was still soft before the latest snowfall. He requested photographs, measurements of the tire groove width, and noted possible tire track, unverified time. Afterward, the team collected additional small fabric fibers caught in the dry bushes, mostly torn and mixed with mud. One of them was dark blue, similar to the fiber sample 004A1 obtained from Rachel's back seat. All evidence was inventoried, sealed at the scene, and transferred directly to the Wisconsin State Central Storage in Madison the same day. The forensic team's report stated clearly, collection process conducted in accordance with Wisconsin forensic standards, ensuring uninterrupted chain of custody from scene to analysis facility. Each evidence bag was affixed with reflective tape, signed by the collector and supervisor. Organic items, like the shoe, fabric fibers, wet soil, were naturally air-dried before sealing to prevent mold. The key ring was dried, scanned for fingerprints, yielding one faint print, but not sufficient for identification. The shoe was photographed close-up from every angle. The sole had a small crack, caked with fine sandy soil, matching the type from the Marshall industrial area, over a mile away. Peters examined all the new evidence with caution, mixed with hope. He knew that in disappearances like this, small dropped or deliberately left items were often the most critical leads. However, the discovery of the house keys puzzled him. If Rachel was forced from the car, the perpetrator might have thrown the keys to mislead, or dropped them during movement. And the shoe, it was far from the car, not along any logical path. No drag marks, no blood, no nearby footprints. Everything seemed as if the items had been gently placed, then covered by subsequent snow. The day's summary report was 17 pages long, including area diagrams, images of each piece of evidence, and GPS coordinate tables. Peters signed for confirmation and sent copies to the sheriff's office. In the assessment section, he wrote, "House keys and shoe discovered in abandoned railway area, time of placement undetermined. Fabric fiber and tire track samples collected and stored per standards. No signs of struggle at location. All evidence possibly directly or indirectly related to disappearance." As night fell, snow began to fall again, covering any remaining traces. The old railway area returned to its inherent silence, with only orange plastic marker stakes peeking through the darkness, silent witnesses to a search no one knew how long would last. After collecting evidence around the abandoned railway, Ron Peters' investigation team shifted to identifying individuals present in the Marshall industrial area during the time Rachel was believed to have disappeared. This data was compiled from shift schedules, security reports, and entry-exit logs of warehouses along the route. The full list included 26 individuals, night shift workers, delivery drivers, security guards, maintenance staff, and residents within a 1-mile radius of the scene. Over 4 days, all were successively invited to Janesville Police Headquarters for statements. The first interviews went smoothly. Most witnesses confirmed they saw no red car parked in the industrial area on the night of February 19th. Or if they did, they assumed it belonged to an employee. However, a security guard from McCord Logistics reported that around nearly midnight, he saw headlights flash on the side road toward the tracks, then disappear. He couldn't recall the vehicle type, only describing it as a small light-colored car, possibly red or silver. When Peters cross-referenced with the time Rachel left the gathering, he noted the suspiciously matching time frame. Subsequent names on the list were scrutinized more closely, especially those without specific alibis. Among them stood out Patrick Gillum, 37, a seasonal maintenance worker for a small machine shop in the industrial area. Gillum was recorded as present in the area that evening, with the reason checking water pumps in Zone A. When invited for questioning, he arrived in old work clothes, thin-faced, stubbled chin, weary appearance. Gillum spoke softly, but avoided eye contact, giving short answers and often pausing mid-sentence to smoke. According to police records, Gillum had a prior conviction for assaulting a woman in Indiana in 1979, sentenced to 7 years for burglary and forcible indecent acts. After release, he moved through short-term jobs with no stable residence history. When Peters asked why he chose Janesville, Gillum replied he was just passing through, hired temporarily to repair plumbing in the industrial area. The temporary contract was signed by a Milwaukee staffing agency, confirming assignment for about 2 weeks in mid-February, coinciding with Rachel's disappearance. Police asked Gillum to describe his exact schedule that night. He said he left the shop at 10 p.m., drove his old pickup to a motel on Palmer Road, about 3 miles from the scene. However, no one witnessed him leaving the industrial area at that time, and no cameras recorded his vehicle. When asked if he knew or had seen Rachel Miller, Gillum insisted, never heard the name. He signed the statement, cooperating to a degree, but maintaining clear wariness. In subsequent days, Peters dug deeper into Gillum's background. Beyond the old conviction, records showed suspicion in a 1985 assault on a woman in Gary, Indiana, but insufficient evidence for charges. The witness description noted suspect about 5'11" brown hair habitual smoker, partially matching Gillum's current appearance. However, 2000 technology did not allow easy DNA or biometric cross-state matching as later, so verification efforts were slow. During the investigation, industrial area employees were also asked about Gillum's behavior. One coworker said he often worked alone, spoke little, and was once caught standing in the yard smoking, looking toward the main road, as if waiting for someone. Still, no one witnessed anything unusual or related to Rachel. Peters had Gillum's motel room searched, but found no suspicious evidence. The pickup contained only work tools, a few greasy rags, and old clothes. The investigation gradually reached a deadlock. All leads pointed to Gillum as possibly involved, but lacked specific evidence for charges. Peters requested sending fiber samples 004A1 and 005D to the lab for comparison with Gillum's work uniform, but results showed no exact match. Gillum's was black nylon with activated carbon blend, while the collected sample was dark blue nylon. This small difference prevented a definitive link. On March 6, Gillum was released, after 2 interviews and vehicle checks. The record stated, no legal basis for detention. Suspect cooperative, denies involvement. Before leaving the station, Peters watched the man walk out. Thick work jacket dusted with shop grime, mud-caked boots heavy. He noted in his log, Gillum, guarded behavior, prior record, unverified route. Involvement not ruled out. At the same time, police continued questioning the other 26 individuals. A few statements mentioned seeing an unfamiliar vehicle moving slowly near the industrial area that night, but no one recalled license plates. One truck driver said he saw a man in a baseball cap, dark jacket, walking toward the gas station around 11 p.m., but details were vague, insufficient for a composite. By late March, with no new evidence or witnesses, Peters had to suspend questioning. He compiled all documents, sending them to the sheriff's office with the initial phase conclusion report. 26 individuals present at Marshall Industrial Area verified. No direct evidence of specific criminal act found. One subject with out-of-state prior, Patrick Gillum, noted, but insufficient data for prosecution. File note: involvement not ruled out. The case, after initial efforts, seemed stuck in place, all clues scattered, the missing woman leaving no sign of life or death. Time passed. The urgent early days of the investigation gradually subsided, replaced by fatigue and deadlock. 6 months after Rachel Miller disappeared, every avenue led to a dead end. No new evidence, no witnesses emerged, and all forensic tests stopped at insufficient for determination. The final report of Investigation Phase 1, nearly 40 pages, documented a meticulous but empty process. Every soil sample, tire track, fabric fiber collected, analyzed, compared, yet all only proved Rachel left her Pontiac under unclear conditions, and then vanished completely. The initial team, led by Lieutenant Ron Peters, worked non-stop for over half a year. He and colleagues reviewed over 300 resident tips around the Marshall industrial area, screened statewide criminal records, sent coordination requests to the Wisconsin Department of Justice and National Crime Center. Dozens of samples were sent for testing, but the Madison lab returned similar results. Insufficient DNA sample, no usable biological traces. The investigation gradually became enveloped in the invisible drift of stagnation. Nothing erroneous, but no progress. Rachel's disappearance had no weapon, no witnesses, no confirmed crime scene. In internal meetings, Many frankly suggested she might have left voluntarily, though that contradicted all prior data. Peters opposed that hypothesis, but could not produce a single piece of evidence to prove otherwise. No body, no crime, a Rock County prosecutor said, and no legal basis to prosecute anyone. By August 2000, official investigation reports were finalized. Most data revolved around three axes: the vehicle scene, evidence from the railway area, and the list of people at the industrial zone. All verified and closed with the conclusion, no specific criminal act found. Patrick Gillum, the only one with a record and suspected, was removed from active investigation due to lack of physical evidence. His file was marked, subject of interest, not cleared, meaning possibly involved but insufficient for charges. In the memo to the Rock County Sheriff, Peters wrote, from February to August 2000, no indication Rachel Miller is alive or moved outside Wisconsin. All financial credit and social contacts ceased at disappearance. No body found, no witnesses, no authentic physical evidence. Recommend temporary closure and transfer to cold case, missing person. The words cold case were stamped in red on the file cover, a quiet confirmation that efforts had reached their limit. That afternoon, Peters personally delivered the file to the Rock County Evidence Storage, where unsolved cases were kept in long rows of steel cabinets. The box labeled Rachel Miller, MP, 01, RJM, contained all evidence: fiber 004A1, keys 005B, shoe 005C, soil 006A, plus copies of scene photos. Each item wrapped separately, coded with sealing records. He placed it in shelf 3, cabinet row 12, beside other dust-covered files, cases whose names were gradually forgotten. When signing the handover, Peters paused a few seconds at investigation reopening date. ____, left blank, then closed the log. At the same time, the case nearly vanished from media. Local papers ran short notices: Janesville police suspend investigation into missing 30-year-old Rachel Miller due to lack of new evidence. File retained for review upon additional data. Her family still lived in the old house south of town, the front door still bearing a wooden welcome home sign, a greeting no one answered. For the agency, this temporary end was not failure, but a necessary pause. Investigators moved to other cases. Old leads cooled. Ron Peters, who pursued the case with all persistence, was reassigned to violent crimes. In his final work report on Rachel, he wrote one short line: no conclusion, only awaiting time and technology. That file box with carefully sealed evidence would lie dormant for years in the darkness of Rock County storage, as if Rachel herself, the woman who vanished in winter, was also buried in the silence of time. From late 2000, after the Rachel Miller case was officially moved to cold case status, the file coded MP 01 RJM was hardly mentioned again. In the final summary record, all evidence was fully documented and sealed per Wisconsin forensic standards, stored at Rock County Evidence Vault under controlled temperature. For the next 16 years, no search warrants, analysis requests, or additional records were added to that file. It lay frozen like a block of memory, recalling an unresolved winter of 2000. In the early 2000s, Rock County recorded a few more disappearances, mostly voluntary departures or accidents in bad weather. Whenever a woman's missing case was mentioned in the press, Rachel Miller's name sometimes appeared in comparison lists, but never with matching patterns or locations. Cases in Beloit, Fort Atkinson, or Jefferson were quickly resolved, the missing found, or causes determined. Rachel's file remained the exception: no body, no explanation, no closure. Throughout the 2001-2005 period, a few new officers at the Janesville Police Department would occasionally pull out the file as a training exercise. They would review Lieutenant Ron Peters' reports, examine crime scene photos and evidence, then place everything back in its original spot. Some left margin notes: nothing wrong, just nothing enough. At that time, forensic technology remained limited. DNA analysis required a minimum of 100–200 picograms of biological material, while the fiber sample recovered in Rachel's case contained an estimated less than 30 picograms, a quantity too small to amplify or replicate using standard PCR techniques. Scientists at the Wisconsin State Laboratory tried multiple times, but the results were always sample-degraded or insufficient for testing. In 2006, as STR technology began to be widely adopted, there was a proposal to re-examine certain old cases likely to contain DNA. However, the priority list only included homicides with recovered bodies, where sample sources were clear. Rachel's missing person case did not fall into that category. Items of evidence such as fabric fibers, shoes, and house keys were deemed low forensic value. The retesting proposal was therefore not approved. The designation MP01 RJM was once again overlooked among hundreds of files on the shelf. Occasionally, on each anniversary of the disappearance, the local Janesville Gazette would run a small article on the back page. 17 years ago, Rachel Miller, 30, vanished without a trace. Police still hope for tips from the public. Next to it was an old portrait photo. A brown-haired woman with gentle eyes, taken at a company party. The article always ended with the same line: "If you know anything, contact the Janesville Police or the Wisconsin Bureau of Investigation." But that phone number never received any significant calls. Meanwhile, the only person ever suspected, Patrick Gillum, left Wisconsin in 2002. Records noted his last known address in South Bend, Indiana. After that, the name Gillum no longer appeared in any Rock County criminal reports. Peters, who had by then transferred to a different unit, kept a personal copy of the initial investigation report. He once told a colleague, "If we ever figure out how to read DNA from dust particles, this case will crack wide open." The remark was just professional wishful thinking. No one expected that, more than a decade later, such technology would actually exist. Throughout the 2007–2012 period, DNA technology advanced rapidly nationwide. Laboratories began using low copy number techniques, allowing analysis of extremely small samples, even just a few cells. Wisconsin also acquired new equipment, but due to budget constraints, priority was given only to cases with identified victims. Nobody missing person cases like Rachel's remained outside the testing scope. Moreover, fiber sample 004A1 had been stored under stable temperature conditions for over 10 years. With a high risk of material degradation, testing could destroy the sample entirely. This very concern made the forensic agency hesitant. From 2013 to 2017, Wisconsin's cold case review program was relaunched, primarily based on digitization. Old files began to be scanned and stored on computer systems for easier access. When administrative staff opened the MP01 RJM file for digitization, they found most documents intact. Scene reports, photos, statements, forensic records, but no electronic records existed. They simply performed the technical task, scanning each page, saving it, and closing the old file cover. None of them noticed, in the evidence section, a faint pencil note by Peters from 2000: strange fabric fiber 004A1. Preserve intact possible epidermal cells. Outside the investigation world, everyone's lives had changed. The town of Janesville grew faster, the Marshall industrial area was expanded and modernized, and the road where Rachel's Pontiac was found had been repaved. The abandoned railroad tracks were dismantled to build warehouses. Many newcomers had no idea that, more than a decade earlier, that spot had been the scene of an unsolved disappearance. And in the deepest corner of the Rock County evidence storage, the brown file box labeled Rachel Miller MP01 RJM lay undisturbed. The sealing tape had yellowed, evidence codes faded over time, but management staff still conducted periodic inventories per regulation. File intact, storage conditions stable, no one suspected that those tiny, seemingly useless samples from 2000 the hair-thin fabric fibers and dry soil in glass tubes, would one day become the only key capable of reopening a case thought to be forever dormant. In February 2018, during a routine review under the Cold Case Initiative, launched by the Wisconsin Department of Justice, the Rachel Miller case unexpectedly came up in an internal meeting of the Criminal Investigation Bureau. The program's goal was to reassess unsolved cases from the 1980s, 2000s, focusing on those with stored biological evidence. Detective Mark Jensen, an experienced investigator from the Violent Crimes Unit, was assigned to review the Rock County group of files. Among more than 30 unsolved cases, he took particular note of one name, P01. RJM, Rachel Miller, with a brief note, DNA sample insufficient for analysis. That phrase immediately caught Jensen's attention. He knew that 2018 DNA testing technology far surpassed the limits of the previous century. When opening the paper file, Jensen saw that all documents had been carefully preserved, from the scene report to the evidence list. He read closely the final assessment by Lieutenant Ron Peters from 2000, then paused at the faint pencil line, strange fabric fiber 004A1. Possible epidermal cells. That note, for nearly 2 decades, seemed to have gone unnoticed by anyone. He requested the evidence storage unit to bring out the evidence box for inspection. When the seal was cut, everything inside remained intact. A glass tube containing a small dark blue fiber, labeled and wrapped in a moisture-proof bag. According to records, this sample had never been retested since 2000. Jensen realized this could be a new starting point. He drafted a report to superiors, proposing to place the Rachel Miller case under reinvestigation per the Cold Case Initiative, citing that the old biological sample might now be sufficient for modern DNA testing. The proposal was approved within 2 weeks. A small team was formed, consisting of 3 DCI investigators, 2 forensic specialists, and a representative from the Janesville Police Department. Jensen was appointed team leader, responsible for coordinating the entire file reopening process. The first step was to fully digitize the old documents. Jensen contacted the Criminology and Forensic Science Department at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, which was running a collaborative project with judicial agencies to scan, categorize, and analyze cold cases on a computing platform. In March 2018, a group of graduate students and faculty were granted access to copies of the Rachel Miller file. They used automated character recognition to scan all more than 2,800 pages of documents, converting them into searchable data files by keyword. The process took nearly 3 weeks, but the results exceeded expectations. Reports, statements, and evidence records scattered over years were linked into a database searchable in seconds. During the review, an intern named Laura McKenzie discovered an anomaly in the evidence catalog. Sample 004A was recorded twice, once in the scene collection log and once in the forensic report. But the forensic conclusion section had no line about DNA test results, only the note not analyzed. Insufficient sample. Laura reported it to Jensen, and he confirmed this was the very fiber mentioned in Peter's handwritten note. The fact that this sample had never been tested with modern methods prompted him to immediately call the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory in Madison to inquire about reanalysis possibilities. Lab specialists informed him that since 2016, they had equipped next-generation sequencing systems technology capable of decoding DNA from extremely small samples, even successfully used in cases with only skin cells or shed hairs. Jensen understood this was the only chance after 18 years. He completed the paperwork, submitted a formal request with a detailed description of sample 004A, and obtained permission to unseal and transfer the sample to the lab for DNA reanalysis using new technology. On April 12, 2018, Jensen and a forensic technician personally went to the Rock County Evidence Storage to retrieve the sample. The process was filmed, documenting every step of unsealing, measuring humidity, and photographing the sample's condition before transport. The fiber, thinner than thread and about 1 centimeter long, was picked up with sterile tweezers, placed in a new test tube, double-sealed, and accompanied by a transfer log. A new label was printed, Sample 004A1 Bear Reanalysis Request, Cold Case Initiative 2018. Jensen signed the log, feeling that what he held was not just an old sample, but the final clue that could salvage a case forgotten for nearly 2 decades. As he left the evidence storage, the April afternoon light shone through the glass windows, casting a golden dust over the long rows of file boxes, other cases also awaiting a similar chance. 3 days later, the sample was hand-delivered to the DNA unit of the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory Division. Lead analyst Dr. Hannah Roberts confirmed receipt of the sample in good condition, seal intact, no signs of damage. She explained that, with current technology, they could amplify and sequence DNA even from just a few skin cells or sweat cells adhering to the fiber. However, the process required high precision and time, at least 6 to 8 weeks, for preliminary results. When signing the receipt log, Jensen felt as if he had just placed a chess piece back on the board after nearly 20 years. He didn't know what would come next, but he had a hunch that this case, the disappearance dormant since 2000, was about to enter an entirely different chapter. In his work log, he wrote a simple line, April 12, 2018. Rachel Miller file officially reopened. Throughout the summer of 2018, the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory worked cautiously with sample 004A sent from Rock County Evidence Storage. The nearly invisible thin fiber was placed under an electron microscope, with each layer of adhering dust separated to avoid cross-contamination. After 2 weeks of primary processing, Dr. Hannah Roberts' team confirmed the presence of human DNA on the sample surface, an extremely small amount, about 27 picograms, equivalent to less than 1,000th the size of a standard sample. Nevertheless, with modern next-generation sequencing technology, that amount was sufficient to initiate the amplification chain reaction. Roberts noted in the technical log, microsample capable of regenerating partial DNA profile, suitable for genealogical matching. Technicians performed DNA extraction using the LCN process, requiring an absolutely sterile room. They isolated 12 genetic loci, fewer than the standard for criminal matching, but enough to create a replication chain for genealogical DNA analysis, a method to trace genetic relatives rather than direct criminal comparison. Preliminary analysis results were sent to Jensen, with the note DNA male gender. No match in the national CODIS system. This confirmed 2 things. The sample did not belong to victim Rachel Miller, and the person who left the trace had never had DNA stored in the criminal database. With that data, Jensen decided to pursue a new investigative direction, using genealogical DNA analysis, technology that had helped solve numerous cold cases in California and Virginia in recent years. He requested permission from the State Department of Justice to collaborate with Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia company specializing in genetic analysis and DNA relative profiling. Authorization was approved by late July. On August 2, 2018, the micro-DNA sample was sealed and sent to Parabon's laboratory via temperature-controlled specialized transport, accompanied by all forensic data authenticated by the state of Wisconsin. Parabon received the sample under high security. Lead analyst Dr. Lydia Hart and her team began processing using the snapshot-registered trademark forensic DNA phenotyping platform, a system capable not only of identifying genetic relationships, but also reconstructing estimated biological traits of the DNA donor, skin, hair, and eye color, and ancestral origin. After more than 3 weeks of separation and amplification, they generated a near-complete autosomal DNA profile with 92% accuracy. Preliminary results indicated the individual had Northern European ancestry, brown hair, blue eyes, and was approximately 30–40 years old when the sample was left. This data was uploaded by Parabon to the OpenGED Match database, where users voluntarily share their DNA test results from commercial services like 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and allow law enforcement to search for distant genetic connections. Investigating through DNA genealogy requires patience and the skill of building family trees. Parabon found 3 DNA accounts with high match levels to sample 004A, 2 women and 1 man, all living in the state of Indiana. The genetic similarity indicated they could be distant relatives within the range of 3 to 4 generations. Lydia Hart and the genealogist team began reconstructing the family tree diagram, tracing back through dozens of branches using publicly available data from birth certificates, marriage records, and civil registries. After nearly 6 weeks, they identified a family line concentrated in the South Bend, Indiana area, with a common ancestor born in the early 20th century. Among the descendant branches, one person with the surname Gillum appeared in the resident list from the 1980-2000 period, matching the surname of Patrick Gillum, who had once been a suspect in the 2000 case. On September 17, 2018, Parabon sent a formal 42-page report to the Wisconsin Department of Justice. The report stated clearly, DNA recovered from evidence 004A has a confirmed genetic link to the Gillum family line in Indiana. The probability of random coincidence is less than 1 in 10 million. Reading those lines, Jensen nearly held his breath. That name, which had been crossed off the suspect list nearly 2 decades earlier, now reappeared unexpectedly thanks to technology that did not exist at the time of the crime. He immediately contacted Parabon to confirm the technical details. Dr. Hart affirmed, "We cannot pinpoint a specific individual, but we can say with certainty that the person carrying this DNA belongs to the same bloodline as the Gillum family, most likely a direct relative." That meant, if Patrick Gillum was still alive, his DNA sample could match sample 004A perfectly. Right after receiving the results, Jensen presented the report to the DCI director and the Rock County prosecutor. An emergency meeting was convened in Madison, attended by Parabon representatives, the state lab, and Jensen's investigation team. The meeting lasted over 2 hours, concluding that this discovery provided sufficient legal basis to reopen the Rachel Miller case. The minutes recorded, on September 25, 2018, file MP-01, RJM was officially changed from cold case status to active investigation. The trace DNA discovery confirms a genetic link to the Gillum family line. Immediately afterward, the investigation team was re-established, this time with coordination between DCI, the Janesville Police Department, and the FBI's Milwaukee branch. Jensen was appointed as the lead commander, responsible for coordinating with federal forensic agencies. The first objective, locate the current whereabouts of Patrick Gillum, who had been questioned in 2000 and released due to lack of evidence. Old files indicated he left Wisconsin and returned to Indiana in early 2002. Before leaving the meeting room, Jensen looked at the old photo of Rachel Miller projected on the screen, a woman with brown hair, a gentle smile, and melancholy eyes. He felt as if she were looking back, not with resentment, but simply waiting for an answer. In his work log that day, Jensen wrote a short but resolute line: "The trace DNA from evidence 004A has spoken." After 18 years, the Rachel Miller case is officially reopened. After the trace DNA from evidence 004A was confirmed to have a link to the Gillum family line in Indiana, the next step in the investigation was to reconstruct a detailed genetic family tree to identify the individual with the highest probability of leaving the biological trace at the crime scene. Parabon Nanolabs sent a team of 3 genealogical DNA specialists, Dr. Lydia Hart, data analyst Meredith Lang, and independent genealogy expert Thomas Craig, to collaborate with Detective Mark Jensen's investigation team for this phase. The DNA data was uploaded to the GED Match platform as an encoded kit, allowing matches with millions of voluntary profiles. The system displayed 27 genetic match results at varying degrees, including 3 with similarity over 120 centimorgans, equivalent to a distant relative relationship of 4th or 5th degree. From those 3, the analysis team began tracing back through generations, searching for common ancestors by combining genetic data with publicly available civil records, birth certificates, marriage records, and death certificates. The work was meticulous and lasted nearly 2 months. Hart and her colleagues created the family tree diagram using Family Tree Maker software, starting from a couple born in the early 20th century in St. Joseph County, Indiana. Thomas and Eleanor Gillum, who had 7 children, 4 of whom stayed in Indiana. 2 moved to Illinois, and 1 went to Wisconsin to work in a factory in the 1970s. From those branches, the team successively identified dozens of descendants carrying the same surname or combined surnames. To narrow the list, Jensen requested focusing on males, as the DNA results from sample 004A confirmed a Y chromosome. The analysis team reviewed the entire Gillum family line in the 3 most recent generations, excluding women and children, retaining only adult males aged 25 to 50 in 2000, the time of the crime. After eliminating those who had died or lived outside the Midwest region, the remaining list had 3 names. 1. Patrick Allen Gillum, born 1963, briefly lived in Janesville, Wisconsin, in 2000. Occupation maintenance worker, prior conviction for assaulting a woman in Indiana in 1979. 2. Charles Raymond Gillum, Patrick's cousin, born 1960, residing in Lafayette, Indiana, transportation worker, no criminal record, stable residence history. Dennis Lee Gillum, cousin, born 1969, former military service, settled in Fort Wayne, Indiana, partial genetic profile in civil database. The genealogist team preliminarily assessed that Patrick Allen Gillum had the highest probability, as in addition to fitting the age range, he had been present in Wisconsin at the exact time the victim disappeared. A detail matching information from the 2000 investigation phase. To strengthen the argument, Dr. Hart requested Jensen provide a copy of Patrick Gillum's 2000 statement. Upon comparing the data, she noted several notable matches: temporary residence address in Janesville, matching the Marshall industrial area, timing of leaving Indiana matching the case suspension period, and especially his mechanical maintenance occupation, fitting the fabric fiber analysis, industrial nylon type commonly found in work uniforms. Meanwhile, the other 2 Gillum relatives, Charles and Dennis, both had clear alibis in 2000. Charles was living with his wife in Lafayette and had a fixed work contract confirmed by the company. Dennis was on active duty in Texas. Eliminating these 2 made the investigation focus even more on Patrick. By mid-November 2018, Parabon's team completed a 7-generation family tree map, clearly showing the connection between sample 004A and Patrick Allen Gillum's direct descendant branch. They presented Jensen with a detailed 54-page report in which the conclusion stated probability that sample 004A belongs to the same bloodline as Patrick A. Gillum. 99.89%. Among the male descendants of the Gillum line, only Patrick A. Gillum meets the conditions of age, location, and residence history matching the time of the crime. Jensen read the report in the DCI office in Madison. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun to fall. Each detail was presented clearly and tightly, nearly closing the circle of suspicion that started 18 years earlier. He recalled the old file from Lieutenant Ron Peters, the note "possible involvement not ruled out" next to Gillum's name, and felt as if there was a thread stretching nearly 2 decades from the vague inference back then to today's genetic results. The report was immediately forwarded to the Wisconsin Department of Justice, then sent to the Rock County Prosecutor's Office to request an order for Patrick Gillum's personal records. According to the latest data, Gillum was living in South Bend, Indiana, about 150 miles from Janesville, working as a freelance laborer with no long-term fixed address. He had not been arrested since leaving Wisconsin in 2002. To ensure legal procedure, the investigation team coordinated with Parabon to prepare the final verification phase, direct DNA matching from Gillum. However, This needed to be done secretly and with a court order, as Gillum was not under warrant. Jensen knew they had to act cautiously. One small mistake could make all the effort vanish. In the summary meeting at the end of November, Jensen presented the genealogical family tree diagram, a complex network of over 120 names, but only one person at the exact center. He concluded, "The family tree is closed. All genetic paths converge on one person, Patrick Allen Gillum." This is no longer a suspicion, but the official investigation direction. As the meeting ended, Jensen stood silently for a moment in front of the screen displaying Gillum's old portrait photo from the 1979 police file, when he was just over 16. The gaze in the photo was cold and tired, but at the corner of the mouth was a thin smile hard to explain, as if the man knew that time could erase many things, except his own traces. In his notebook, Jensen wrote, "They have found the bloodline. Now it's time to find the one who carries it." After the genetic family tree identified Patrick Allen Gillum as the person with the highest probability of leaving DNA at the crime scene, Detective Mark Jensen moved to the phase of re-examining Gillum's entire criminal history in Indiana, records forgotten since the late 1970s. He contacted the Gary Police Department, where Gillum had lived, and received digitized PDF copies of archived microfilm files. The name Patrick A. Gillum, born 1963, appeared under sexual assault burglary, 1979. The report detailed the case. The victim was a 28-year-old art teacher, attacked at her home at night. The perpetrator broke in through the back door, subdued the victim, attempted rape but fled when resisted. Police arrested Gillum after 3 days, upon finding him driving a car containing the victim's wallet and credit cards. Gillum was 16 at the time, tried as an adult, and sentenced to 14 years in Indiana State Prison. He was released in 1986, after serving more than half the sentence. As Jensen read each page of the old interrogation transcript, he immediately recognized a familiar behavioral pattern: nighttime break-in, targeting women living alone, quick attack, and fleeing without completing the sexual act. According to the file, Gillum claimed he didn't know why he did it, citing alcohol and just wanting to scare her. However, the victim's statement showed the perpetrator was well prepared, wearing gloves, a mask, carrying a small knife. When Jensen compared that description to the details in Rachel Miller's disappearance, he saw suspicious matches. Rachel vanished on a remote road. No signs of struggle, but indications of being forced from the car in a controlled manner. This fit the pattern of a criminal tending to quickly subdue then move the victim to another location, similar to Gillum's behavior in Indiana. Jensen continued investigating the period after Gillum's release. Parole records showed he worked seasonal jobs in various mechanical shops and factories, frequently changing residences. There were at least 2 other incidents noted in Gary and South Bend police reports involving stalking women or public disturbance, but lacking elements to constitute a crime. Each time questioned, Gillum denied and moved elsewhere. In 1998, he registered to work for an infrastructure maintenance company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. From there, he was assigned temporary work in Janesville in early 2000. When piecing together the entire chain of data, the picture gradually emerged. Gillum was a person with cyclic violent criminal behavior, often reappearing after a few years of calm. DCI criminal psychologists were invited to evaluate the file. The behavioral analysis report stated, Gillum exhibits typical characteristics of a planned sexual offender. He tends to target adult women, act in familiar locations, leave the scene clean, and avoid clear traces. The fabric fiber sample 004A recovered from Rachel's back seat could be a remnant of a work uniform type. A significant coincidence, as Gillum was a maintenance worker and often wore dark nylon uniforms. Another detail particularly caught Jensen's attention. In the 1979 file, police noted Gillum smoked continuously during interrogation, and when arrested, he was holding a half-smoked cigarette. This note seemed meaningless, but when cross-referenced with the 2000 crime scene report near Rachel's Pontiac, police had collected an extinguished cigarette butt near abandoned railroad tracks. though unable to determine the drop time. In 2000, that evidence was deemed unrelated. Now Jensen saw it as a small but important sign, showing a repeating behavioral habit of the suspect. In the summary presented to the Rock County prosecutor, Jensen wrote, Patrick Allen Gillum, 55 years old, residing in South Bend, Indiana, prior conviction for assaulting a woman. Behavioral history matches the pattern of calculated sexual assault crime. Currently, the primary suspect in the Rachel Miller disappearance. This document marked the official shift from a name in old files to a key investigation target. When reviewing the federal database system, the FBI confirmed Gillum had no DNA stored in CODIS, as Indiana's regulations for collecting DNA from sex offenders only applied from 1996. This explained why sample 0048 did not match any profiles in the system. Jensen understood that to prove the link, they needed a direct DNA sample from Gillum for comparison. Before concluding the report, he added a personal note. Gillum's first crime showed calculation, choosing a quiet location, controlling the victim with a knife, and withdrawing when interrupted. 21 years later, Rachel Miller's disappearance exhibited the same behavioral pattern, differing only in outcome. The victim had no chance to call for help. At the end of 2018, as snow began to cover Wisconsin white, the DCI Investigation Office issued an internal memo, Patrick A. Gillum, designated primary suspect. From here, all investigation efforts were directed toward the man who had escaped punishment for decades. In Jensen's eyes, the Rachel Miller case was no longer a cold file, but an unpaid debt of justice. In January 2019, after Patrick Allen Gillum was identified as the official suspect in the Rachel Miller disappearance, Detective Mark Jensen presented a surveillance plan to the Wisconsin Department of Justice. The goal was to collect a biological sample from Gillum for direct comparison with the DNA from evidence 004A. As the suspect was living in South Bend, Indiana, the plan was implemented through federal coordination with the South Bend Police Department and the FBI's Indianapolis branch. All activities were conducted secretly, without letting Gillum know the old case had been reopened. According to residence records, Gillum lived alone in a ground-floor apartment in an old complex on Johnson Street, on the city outskirts. He was 56 years old, lived reclusively, worked seasonally at a small mechanical shop, sometimes taking machine repairs for private garages. Jensen and 2 federal agents arrived in Indiana posing as the Cold Case Task Force to coordinate with local police. They set up 24-hour rotating surveillance for the first 2 weeks, recording all daily habits, travel routes, and locations Gillum frequented. The surveillance report showed Gillum had a regular routine, leaving home at 7:30 a.m., driving an old brown Chevrolet pickup to the shop, lunch at a small diner, late evenings returning, sometimes stopping at a gas station or convenience store. He often smoked Marlboro Lights, cigarettes, a habit maintained almost all day. Half-smoked cigarettes were discarded out the car window or on the sidewalk near his home. This habit opened a major opportunity for the investigation team. Environmental DNA in cigarette butts could be used to compare with sample 004A. A team of technicians secretly installed surveillance cameras in the parking area and shop entrance to record times when Gillum smoked or discarded trash. However, collection had to strictly follow legal regulations. Samples must be abandoned in public places without invading privacy. Jensen emphasized in the plan, absolutely no direct approach to the suspect, only collect samples when items are freely discarded. On January 22, around 9:10 a.m., Gillum stopped his car in front of the shop and smoked as usual. When he went inside, an undercover investigator posing as a sanitation worker approached, collected the still warm cigarette, placed it in a sterile plastic tube, labeled DNA, ENV 001. The first sample was transferred to South Bend Police Headquarters, then sealed and sent to Wisconsin for analysis. However, the lab reported that the DNA amount was too low, as the filter tip was burned and contaminated with machine oil, making extraction unfeasible. Jensen decided a new, cleaner sample was needed for accurate analysis. In the following days, the team continued monitoring. They noted Gillam's habit of sitting on a bench near the St. Joseph riverbank after work, smoking and reading the newspaper. This was an ideal public location for sample collection. On January 28, Jensen personally, along with agent Jason Cortez, set up remote surveillance with binoculars. When Gillam left, they observed him extinguishing the cigarette on the pavement, then tossing the filter into the grass beside the bench. Jensen signaled. Cortez immediately approached, wearing gloves, using tweezers to pick up the still warm cigarette, placing it in a sterile nylon bag, sealing on site. The sample was coded DNA, ENV-002. This time, to avoid cross-contamination risk, the sample was transported immediately by specialized vehicle to the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory Division within 4 hours. Upon receipt, Dr. Hannah Roberts, who had previously handled evidence 004, noted in the log, cigarette collected in Indiana. Good preservation conditions, likely contains full saliva sample. The sample was processed using the LCN procedure, extracting epithelial cells from the filter. 4 days later, the preliminary report was sent to Jensen, complete DNA obtained, male gender, profile usable for comparison. At the same time, the surveillance team in Indiana continued collecting additional items, plastic cups discarded in trash near the garage, coffee straws, tissues. Each item was coded and stored, but the sample from the second cigarette remained prioritized as it had the clearest biological traces. In the temporary office in South Bend, Jensen and the agent team reviewed all surveillance videos. Gillam's every action appeared normal, with no signs of fear or suspicion. He seemed still the solitary man, hiding among old habits. Jensen noted in the report, Gillam has no family, minimal social contact, mostly works alone. Stable movement patterns, no signs of preparing to leave the area. That allowed him to feel assured that they had enough time to wait for the identification results. While waiting, he reviewed the old statements from 2000, each line from Lieutenant Ron Peters, reread like an echo from the past, possible involvement not ruled out. Now all his efforts were aimed at proving that note was correct. By early February, the official report from the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory was sent via secure channel. The 6-page report, titled Comparative DNA Analysis, Evidence 004A1 versus Environmental Sample DNA, ENV-002. The conclusion line made Jensen stand silent for a long time. Results match completely at 20/20ths loci analyzed. Probability of random coincidence, 1 in 9.8 billion. Though not yet permitted to act immediately, Jensen understood they now held the most critical evidence since the case was reopened. He called the Rock County prosecutor, informing him that the DNA sample from Patrick Gillam's cigarette matched perfectly with the DNA recovered from the evidence in Rachel Miller's car in 2000. Biological evidence, which technology 2 decades earlier could not access, had now spoken for itself. That night, as he left the temporary office in South Bend, Jensen walked through the parking lot where Gillam often stood smoking. A cold wind blew, carrying the faint smell of cigarette smoke, like a trace of time turning backward. He looked down at the ground, where a few older cigarette butts remained, and thought silently, perhaps right here the past left a clue we've only just seen. On the drive back to Madison, he wrote in his work log, February 5, 2019, collected environmental DNA sample from Patrick A. Gillam. Results match completely with evidence 004. A. First evidence, after 19 years. Early morning of February 6, 2019, the official DNA identification report was delivered to Detective Mark Jensen's desk at the Wisconsin Department of Justice headquarters in Madison. The 11-page document, stamped with the red seal of the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory Division, marked the forensic analysis result awaited for nearly 2 decades. On the first page, the concise but decisive conclusion: DNA sample recovered from evidence 004A1 matches completely with the environmental DNA sample from the cigarette-coated DNA, ENV002. Probability of random coincidence is 1 in 9.8 billion. Jensen read and reread that number, feeling as if he had just heard a soft knock in the cold room, the echo of justice returning. He immediately forwarded a copy of the report to the Wisconsin State Prosecutor's Office and sent a summary to the Rock County Prosecutor's Office. The report included a detailed 20-loci DNA analysis table, comparative gene sequence charts, and the signed certification of Dr. Hannah Roberts, who directly conducted the examination. Every step followed National Forensic Science Institute standards, ensuring absolute legality. In the notes section, Roberts emphasized, random coincidence at this level is impossible if the two samples are not from the same biological source. That afternoon, Jensen held an online meeting with Rock County Chief Prosecutor David Larson and representatives from the State Attorney General's office. They agreed that the DNA evidence was sufficient to reopen the Rachel Miller case, frozen for nearly 19 years. Larson requested Jensen draft a federal arrest warrant application, citing direct biological evidence linking suspect Patrick Allen Gillum to the crime scene. Jensen immediately prepared the comprehensive document, the first part detailing surveillance and sample collection, the middle describing test results in detail, the final concluding, based on absolute DNA match evidence, combined with prior criminal history and 2,000 residents' data, Patrick Allen Gillum is identified as the primary suspect in the disappearance and suspected murder of Rachel Miller. Request the Wisconsin State Court issue an arrest warrant and preliminary indictment. On February 8, the file was submitted to the Dane County Court, which handles federal investigation arrest approvals, accompanied by all forensic evidence, sample collection records, crime scene photos, and cross-state records between Wisconsin and Indiana. Judge Rebecca Alston reviewed the documents for nearly 2 hours, then signed the arrest warrant with a federal extradition clause, allowing the Wisconsin investigation team to coordinate with Indiana police when conditions were met. The red AP-approved stamp was placed on the final page, ending a nearly 2-decade wait. Upon confirmation, Jensen convened an emergency meeting with the cold case team in Madison. He placed a copy of the DNA report in the center of the table, everyone's eyes fixed on the line. 9.8 billion. We have evidence, he said slowly. For the first time in 19 years, the Rachel Miller case has a real foothold. The room fell silent for a few seconds, then the soft sound of pens tapping on the table rang out, like confirmation that the investigation was no longer hypothesis, but real legal action. The state prosecutor's office immediately issued an internal notice to media agencies. The Rachel Miller disappearance case has been reopened for investigation. New forensic evidence from evidence and environmental samples identifies the primary suspect as Patrick Allen Gillum, residing in South Bend, Indiana. The notice did not disclose technical details, but confirmed modern DNA technology played a key role in reviving the case. Local newspapers like the Janesville Gazette and Wisconsin State Journal simultaneously reported. 19-year cold case restarted, police confirmed DNA evidence breakthrough. Legally, the Rachel Miller case file status was updated in the state judicial system from closed cold case to reopened active investigation. All evidence, records, and digitized data were retrieved from Rock County storage, resealed under new procedures. Digital copies were transferred to the Department of Justice Central Database for permanent storage. In the internal report, Jensen noted, biological evidence 004A1 is now considered key evidence. All preservation procedures, chain of custody, and verification have been rechecked, with no discrepancies. By mid-February, when the prosecutor's office completed administrative procedures, Jensen and the investigation team prepared a coordination plan with the South Bend Police Department to execute the arrest. He spent one evening rereading the entire 2000 file, each line from Ron Peters coming alive, possible victim forced from vehicle, potential suspect, Patrick Gillum, involvement not ruled out. Now those words had an answer. Nearly 20 years, technology and time had finally connected the two ends of a thread that seemed broken. In the report to the chief prosecutor on February 11, 2019, Jensen wrote, DNA results confirm direct link between evidence from the victim's vehicle and suspect Patrick A. Gillum. This is the first authenticated evidence since the case opened in 2000. With this result, we officially restart the criminal investigation phase, focusing on arrest and prosecution of the suspect. The same day, the Rachel Miller case file was updated in the central system with new status, Case ID MP01. RJM status, active, homicide investigation. Primary suspect, Patrick Allen Gillum. Those lines closed nearly 2 decades of deadlock, opening a phase where justice was no longer a distant promise. In the cold February office, Jensen placed the DNA report copy on the file shelf, next to the portrait photo of Rachel Miller he always kept on his desk. Under the light, the paper reflected a dim glow, Dr. Roberts' final line clearly visible, match confirmed. And Jensen, after nearly a year of persistence, knew this was only the beginning of the final part of the journey that he and all of Wisconsin had waited 19 years for. Early morning of February 15, 2019, the air in South Bend was cold and damp, the sun not yet above the low buildings on Johnson Street. On the quiet road, 3 unmarked South Bend police vehicles, 1 FBI Indianapolis branch vehicle, and 1 Wisconsin Department of Justice vehicle, silently stopped in front of the 2-story building where Patrick Allen Gillum was renting. Inside, Detective Mark Jensen sat in the back seat, holding a copy of the federal arrest warrant, confirmed by the Dane County Court, Wisconsin. At 6:14 a.m., when the SWAT team completed positioning, Jensen signaled with a nod. 18 years of waiting ended with the first knock on the door. The loudspeaker echoed in the silent morning, "Patrick Allen Gillum, this is South Bend Police. We have a warrant for your arrest." No response. The wooden door remained still for a few seconds, then a stocky figure appeared through the window curtain. Gillum did not run, just stared outside, face blank. When the door was opened, he stepped back, raising his hands halfway. 2 agents immediately subdued him, cuffing his hands behind his back. The arrest occurred in absolute silence, only the internal radio crackling. Jensen entered last, confirming identity, reading the warrant clearly. "Mr. Patrick Allen Gillum, you are under arrest for suspected involvement in the disappearance of Rachel Miller, Janesville, Wisconsin, 2000. Gillum did not resist or ask why. He only said softly, "I knew it." While Gillum was escorted out, the investigation team conducted an emergency apartment search under the accompanying warrant. The small room, old furniture, wooden table, folding bed, metal cabinet, and an old radio. On the work desk, police seized a paper map of Wisconsin, neatly folded but with red marks on Janesville and the Marshall industrial area. In the drawer was a multi-tool knife with a worn tip and 2 pairs of dark green nylon gloves, material nearly identical to the fiber sample 004A from Rachel's car. Beside them, a maintenance toolbox containing pliers, wrenches, flashlight, and a roll of industrial tape. All were sealed, coded as evidence, and photographed at the scene. Police collected all for additional DNA comparison, though Jensen knew the previous cigarette sample was already sufficient. In the wardrobe, an old dark green maintenance uniform still stained with grease, embroidered Marshall Equipment Services, the company where Gillum briefly worked in Janesville in 2000. That was physical evidence confirming his presence in the area at the time of the crime. The search lasted nearly 2 hours, conducted orderly, without drawing neighbor attention. As police vehicles left the complex, neighbors began opening doors, curiously watching the escorted convoy pass through the thin snow. An elderly woman later told a local reporter that Mr. Gillum lived quietly, never spoke to anyone, just smoked all day. Gillum was taken to South Bend Police Station for extradition processing. In the record, he remained calm, did not deny identity, only asked, "Do I have to go back to Wisconsin?" Jensen replied, "Yes, you will be questioned in Madison." Gillum nodded, said no more. As the escort vehicle left the station, he sat still, looking out the window, breath fogging in the cold air. In Wisconsin, The Rock County Prosecutor's Office had prepared federal suspect reception procedures. On February 16, the Wisconsin State Extradition Team arrived in South Bend to receive the individual. They handed over files and temporary evidence to the local court before departing. Gillum was placed in a specialized vehicle, hands cuffed in front, wearing a thick jacket and old jeans. His hands still had grease stains, fingernails dark, signs of a manual laborer. Jensen sat in the front, silent throughout the 240-kilometer journey to Madison. As the convoy crossed the state line, arrest information was transmitted to Wisconsin Department of Justice headquarters and Janesville Police. The internal bulletin stated, "Suspect Patrick Allen Gillum, arrested in South Bend, Indiana. Morning of February 15, 2019. Extradition successful. Currently en route to Wisconsin for questioning in the Rachel Miller disappearance case." News quickly spread to regional media, but the DCI spokesperson only confirmed briefly, "A suspect has been arrested. The investigation is ongoing." By late afternoon, the convoy arrived in Madison at dusk. Gillum was taken to holding cell number 4, the isolation area for special case suspects. All procedures followed federal protocol: medical check, fingerprinting, photographing, file update. The new photo showed a gaunt face, hair streaked with gray deep-set eyes, but the gaze still cold and proud. Jensen completed the final daily report, detailing seized evidence, Wisconsin map, multi-tool knife, nylon gloves, maintenance uniform, and personal items, all sealed and transferred to the state lab for additional biological trace examination. In the conclusion he wrote, "Arrest proceeded smoothly, no resistance. Suspect, Patrick Allen Gillum, safely transported to Wisconsin. This is the first step in prosecuting the Rachel Miller case, 19 years after her disappearance." That night, Jensen left headquarters as snow began to fall. He paused in the parking lot, looking through the frame where hallway light spilled out, cell number 4, where the man who escaped justice 20 years ago now sat in silence. Finally, the circle had closed. Morning of February 17, 2019, Patrick Allen Gillum was brought into interrogation room number 3 at the Wisconsin Department of Justice headquarters in Madison. The sealed room contained only a metal table, 2 chairs, and a ceiling-mounted camera. Detective Mark Jensen, along with Rock County Prosecutor David Larson, conducted the first questioning session. Gillum, in an orange detention jumpsuit, looked tired but calm. Before starting, Jensen read the Miranda rights as required. He nodded confirmation, voice hoarse. "I understand." The recording began at 9:02 a.m. Initial questions focused on biography, work, and residence in early 2000. Gillum answered steadily, neither evading nor volunteering. When Jensen mentioned the name Rachel Miller, he paused slightly. A brief moment, eyes shifting from the table. "I remember her," he said, voice almost a whisper. The room fell silent. Jensen asked, "Where did you meet her?" Gillum sighed, eyes briefly closing. "On my way home. She stopped the car because I signaled." According to the statement, on the evening of February 19, 2000, Gillum was driving his pickup truck back from the Marshall Industrial Area when the vehicle broke down near a remote stretch of road. He stood waiting in the snow, saw a red Pontiac approaching. He signaled for help. Rachel stopped, rolled down the window. Gillum asked her to lend him her phone to call for roadside assistance, but when she said there was no signal, he stepped closer, opened the car door. "I don't know why I did it," he said, eyes looking at the floor. "I just told her to drive into the old warehouse lot, and I would explain." Rachel did not resist immediately, perhaps thinking he really needed help. When she realized something was wrong, she tried to turn the car around, but Gillum had already opened the door, grabbed the steering wheel, and forced the car to pull into the abandoned warehouse on the edge of the industrial area. "I told her to stay calm," he recounted. "Just stay for a bit." Rachel panicked, demanded to leave. Gillum used nylon cord to tie her hands with a rope taken from the toolbox in his truck. "She cried a lot, said she wanted to go home," he said, voice even. "I didn't intend to harm her, just wanted to talk." He stated that he kept Rachel for 2 days, from the night of the 19th to the evening of the 21st of February, in a small room behind the warehouse, formerly used as an old office. He brought her water and crackers from a nearby store. When the prosecutor asked why he didn't release her, Gillum only replied, "I was afraid she would report to the police. I didn't know what to do anymore." Jensen asked, "So what happened after that?" Gillum was silent for a long time, then said, "She stopped moving, I think, probably because of the cold, or because she didn't eat anything. I left." According to the statement, he left the warehouse the next morning, returned to the gas station to wash his hands, then drove back to his lodging. He said he locked Rachel's car, left the keys inside, then walked to the railroad area, where police later found the key ring and the shoe. When asked if he hid the body, Gillum shook his head. "I don't know. I left. She was lying there." Jensen leaned forward. "Did you go back?" Gillum shook his head. "No. I never went back." Prosecutor Larson continued asking about the exact location of the warehouse. Gillum stated it was the North Marshall area, near the old lumber mill. When the map was placed on the table, he pointed to the site formerly Marshall Equipment Services, the exact place he had worked temporarily that year. This location was just over a mile from where the Pontiac was found, fully consistent with the geographic data from the original report. When Jensen asked why he chose that place, Gillum said, "I knew the roads. I knew no one went there at night." Throughout the interrogation, Gillum showed no remorse, as if recounting an old event. He emphasized multiple times that he did not intend to kill, that Rachel died from the cold or fear. However, his statement matched significantly with the physical evidence: the time the car was abandoned, direction of movement, distance to the railroad, where items were found, and details about the nylon cord, the same material appearing in the fiber sample recovered from the back seat. Jensen showed him the photo of the Pontiac as found, asked, "You left the keys in the car?" Gillum nodded. "Yes. I didn't want anyone to think I stole it." That answer silenced the room. No signs of lying in his voice, but Jensen understood he was selectively disclosing. When asked about the body, Gillum refused to reveal, only saying, "She's not there anymore. I think someone cleaned out that warehouse." The statement was recorded, lasting over 2.5 hours. The entire content was transcribed and formalized into an official record. Behavioral analysts later reviewed the video and concluded, Gillum exhibits signs of partial admission. He tries to maintain control in the narrative, admitting coercive actions, but avoiding the word kill. This type of statement is common in experienced offenders. When cross-referencing the statement with timeline data, the results showed astonishing matches. Rachel left the meeting around 9 p.m. on February 19th. A gas station camera near Marshall recorded red car headlights passing at 9:22. Gillum stated encountering her on the same route, and by the morning of February 22nd, heavy snow was falling. Exactly when he said he left the warehouse. Those details align perfectly with the event chain in the old file. The comprehensive report signed by Jensen confirmed, suspect Patrick Allen Gillum's statement is consistent with on-site evidence, spatial data, and physical evidence. Although the victim's body location has not been determined, the interrogation content provides sufficient basis to establish criminal acts, coercion, unlawful detention, and resulting in death. The Wisconsin State Prosecutor's Office, after reviewing the file, officially classified the Rachel Miller case as kidnapping resulting in death, kidnapping leading to death. A preliminary indictment was prepared within the same week. The interrogation ended at 11:47 a.m. As Jensen stood to gather documents, Gillum looked up and asked, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" Jensen looked at him, replied slowly, "I think she didn't deserve to die in that winter." Gillum bowed his head, said no more. He was led out, passing through the brightly lit hallway, where everything seemed utterly silent. Behind the closing metal door, Jensen still watched, feeling in that silence the echo of an old winter. The winter when a woman vanished from the world, and now the truth had finally been spoken. On July 12, 2019, the United States District Court for the Western District of Wisconsin, in the city of Madison, opened the trial of Patrick Allen Gillum, the primary suspect in the disappearance and death of Rachel Miller, after nearly 2 decades. In the old oak-paneled courtroom, light from high windows fell on the jury benches, dimly illuminating the nearly 10,000-page file stack. The electronic board headline read clearly, United States versus Patrick A. Gillum, Case Num. 19, CR 118. Charge: kidnapping, resulting in death. Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1201, A1. The courtroom atmosphere was thick, blending anticipation and the heaviness of years left unresolved. Chief Prosecutor David Larson, representing the state of Wisconsin, presented the opening indictment. On February 19, 2000, defendant Patrick Allen Gillum coerced victim Rachel Miller to stop her vehicle, unlawfully detained her, confined her for 2 days, resulting in death. This act constitutes the federal crime of kidnapping, resulting in death. Evidence includes DNA samples, defendant's statement, and prior similar convictions in Indiana. When he read the phrase, "one of the longest cold cases in Wisconsin history," everyone present turned their gaze to the front row, where Rachel's parents sat silently, eyes red and wet. Gillum, now 67 years old, entered the court in a gray prison uniform, wrists in light cuffs. He had no private attorney, represented by public defender Michael Turner, experienced in federal criminal cases. Gillum maintained composure, eyes not scanning around, focused only on the table. When Chief Judge Harold F. Simmons asked for the plea, Turner stood, said briefly, "Your Honor, my client pleads guilty, but without intent to cause the victim's death." The statement silenced the courtroom, an indirect admission, but weighty after 19 years of silence. The first evidence the prosecution presented was the DNA identification results, evidence 004A1, from the back seat of Rachel Miller's car, matching completely with the environmental DNA sample from Gillum's cigarette in 2019. Forensic expert Dr. Hannah Roberts testified before the court. The match level is absolute error probability, 1 in 9.8 billion. 2 different people cannot share this genetic profile. On the projection screen, the gene chart appeared, colored bars, showing fully repeating sequences between the 2 samples. Below, a clip recording the sample collection process was played, proving the evidence chain of custody remained intact over nearly 2 decades. Next, the prosecution played the interrogation video at the Wisconsin Department of Justice headquarters, in which Gillum admitted stopping Rachel's car, forcing her into the abandoned warehouse, and holding her for 2 days. Though he insisted no intent to kill, the unlawful detention and abandonment in harsh cold conditions were sufficient to constitute kidnapping resulting in death. When the recording reached Gillum saying, "I left when she stopped moving," many in the courtroom bowed their heads, some left their seats, unable to bear it. Prosecutor Larson also presented Gillum's 1979 prior conviction file in Indiana, when he was arrested for sexually assaulting a woman in her home, sentenced to 14 years, released after 7. Similar behavioral pattern, approaching lone women, exploiting remote locations, using binding cords and work tools. Both cases occurred in industrial residential areas, same psychological coercion and victim control. Larson emphasized, voice steady and resolute. The jury took quick notes on paper, faces grave. Defense attorney Turner argued that Gillum cooperated during the investigation, voluntarily confessed, and there was no direct evidence of injury or intent to kill. He contended that Rachel may have died from hypothermia, and his client, though committing serious crimes, had no intent to murder. However, the prosecution immediately countered, intent does not need direct action. When he bound and abandoned a woman in a Wisconsin winter, he chose death for her. In the witness section, Detective Mark Jensen was called to the stand. He presented the entire case reopening process, from digitizing files, discovering unanalyzed evidence, to lab collaboration and tracing via genealogy DNA. When asked why he didn't give up, Jensen replied, "Because everything was still there, the car, the evidence, and the silence of a husband waiting for an answer for 19 years. I think Rachel deserved to be found, even if only in the files. His words silenced the courtroom, only the soft pen taps of the court clerk remaining. After 3 days of arguments, the 12-person jury deliberated in closed session for nearly 5 hours. At 3:47 p.m. on July 15, 2019, they returned to the courtroom. Judge Simmons asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, voice firm. "Yes, Your Honor. We find defendant Patrick Allen Gillum guilty as charged." In that moment, Gillum's face showed no emotion. He only briefly closed his eyes, as if the outcome was anticipated. On July 29, the sentencing hearing was held. Prosecutor Larson requested a 25-year federal sentence without early parole, citing the severity and duration of the case. Attorney Turner requested 20 years, emphasizing age and cooperation. After review, Judge Simmons pronounced, "The court sentences Patrick Allen Gillum to 23 years federal imprisonment, no early release eligibility, pursuant to 18 U.S.C. Section 1201, the Room 1. The room was silent for a few seconds before the gavel sounded. Gillum bowed his head, no reaction. In the public gallery, Rachel's mother tightly held her son's hand, eyes tearful. Jensen stood in the back row, only nodding slightly, not satisfaction, but closure. 23 years could not return a woman's life, but it was the answer to a case the entire state of Wisconsin once thought would forever fade into oblivion. The sentence was described by media as a turning point in forensic science and investigative persistence. Outlets like the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, CBS Madison, and NBC 15 all reported 19-year cold case closed, belated justice for Rachel Miller. In the year-end summary report of the State Department of Justice, the case was noted as one of the longest cold cases solved using DNA genealogy technology in Wisconsin. In August 2019, Gillum was transferred to the Federal Correctional Institution Terre Haute, Indiana, for long-term inmates. In the official file, it read, "Case closed, convicted." Below was a small but heavy line, "Justice served after 19 years." As Jensen left the court that day, snow had melted on the entrance path, only weak late summer sunlight covering the stone steps. He paused, looking at the building with its faded copper dome, where justice, though delayed, could still find its way back. And in a brief moment, he thought of Rachel Miller, of the files still lying silent in the state's cold storage, each name, each code, a promise yet unfulfilled. But today, at least one promise had been kept. The story of Rachel Miller is not just a case closed after 19 years, but also reflects many foundational values of modern American life, where justice, faith in science, and persistence remain the forces shaping society. In today's America, where people increasingly rely on technology and social media, this case reminds us that truth never truly disappears. It is only temporarily obscured by time. A small fabric fiber, carefully preserved for nearly 2 decades, became the key bringing the criminal to light. A detail showing the value of protecting things that seem small but right, whether in work, research, or human relationships. Detective Mark Jensen's journey also carries a lesson in perseverance and professional ethics, qualities anyone in American society, from teachers and engineers to public servants, can learn from. He reread every page of old files, believing no case is hopeless if one dares to start again. In a nation that prizes pragmatism like the United States, this story emphasizes that effectiveness lies not just in speed, but in the ability to not give up in the face of failure. Finally, solving the case through genealogy DNA technology is a powerful reminder of the relationship between science and ethics. Technical progress only truly matters when used to serve people. In a society facing crises of trust and division, the Rachel Miller case reminds us that justice comes not only from courts, but from the belief that truth is always worth persistently seeking. If you believe justice, even when late, deserves to be found like in Rachel Miller's story, please subscribe to the channel to continue exploring cold cases unveiled by time and science with us. Thank you for following to the end of the story. See you in the next video, where we continue the journey to find forgotten truths.